All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the power rankings. This is how I'm gonna start doing things from now on, just ranking everybody, and I'm gonna be ranking all of the teams in the Soggy Fried Discord based on how I view them. And as I go over everybody's games every week to week, these teams might be subject to change. The first teams might move down some, the bottom teams might move up some, however. But there are 7 teams that I have here. I'm going to be going over everybody's draft, what I think about them, and then at the end, I'm going to do like a live tiering thing because I actually don't have an idea of where I think everybody is just yet. Just like kind of general thoughts. So I think I'm going to put that out while I go over everybody's team. So starting off, I'm not gonna go in draft order or anything. I'm just gonna go with the order that I have them on here. I have Allie's team. The team that does not have a name yet. I've been calling it the Missing Nose. Um, so Allie first has this Drought Torkoal. And also, by the way, I've talked about everything extensively in the draft recap as for Pokemon as like individuals. So I'm going to be trying to talk about teams in like compositions and how I think that it stacks up compared to everybody else's. So Ali has this Torkoal that is kind of like the center point of her team. From what I can see, it is her only way to get rid of hazards besides Dragonite. Um, and maybe like defog Volcarona. I don't know if that works. Um, but it is also one of her only stealth rockers besides Garganacl. So she only really had and like Bisharp. So she only really has like 2 or 3 rockers. Only really has like 2 or 3 rapid spinners. So in terms of hazard control, she does not have a lot. However, she does have a lot of Pokemon that really do be like in heavy duty boots in Volcarona, in Dragonite, and some Pokemon that don't even care about it, like Garganacl wouldn't care. However, stuff like Volt switching is going to be really hard for her. She's really going to have to stay in with a lot of Pokemon for risk of taking that rocks damage. And I think that that's really going to affect the items she's going to be able to build and so on and so forth. So so I think that that's going to be a real weakness for her. However, um, I think that she does have a lot that she's working with. I think Paldea Tauros is really, really important for her as a wall. Its defense is pretty good, its HP is good, and it's got some decent offense. And it can like survive hits because Intimidate and Cudchew. And I think that I think that that's going to be like a secret crutch that she's going to lean on a lot. Um, as well as I think that this Chiyu being able to eat everything in its path is really going to be come down to how she uses these 2 Pokemon right here. And everything, and it's also going to come down to how everybody builds against the rest of her team too, because if people only focus against those 2 Pokemon and not build for the rest of her team that's full of threats, then that's going to get fucked up. I also think that Dragapult is a really scary Pokemon. I think that Ali has a lot of really scary like comp Pokemon. Like Dragapult is really scary, and Goldengo is really scary because Good as Gold is a crazy ability, and Volcarona can set up really well, and Dragonite, from what I've seen in this generation, is probably going to be more of like a tank. Like it can get extreme speed and Earthquake and Dragon Dance and all that stuff, but it also gets like Roost and Thunderwave, and Heavy Duty Boots is fine, and Encore and Aqua Jet and a lot of other crazy shit. Dragonite gets a lot of fucking moves, and I think that Heavy Duty Boots with multi scale is really good. So we're gonna see how that comes into play. Lots of Yachi Berry I expect to not die from everything, but also like Dragonite on a Sun team is really strong because who's gonna run Ice into 3 Fire types and the Paldea Water type. But still really strong against her Dragapult. Um, I think that she has a really well-rounded team of Pokemon that cover each other's weaknesses really well. But I also think that if she comes across something that she does not have an answer for, that it really will bite her if she doesn't play her Ditto very effectively and she doesn't play her speed tiers effectively. Because Ali's speed tier is actually really low outside of Dragapult from what I'm seeing. Like 101 on Sandy Shocks is decent, 100 on Tauros, and then like Ditto to counteract everything. But like nothing not a lot above 100. So we're gonna see how that stacks up. Um, so far though, I think that she's got really strong team to work with. Next up, we have Mass. Oh, actually, real fast before I do that, I'm gonna talk about Allie. How I think she does against individual teams. I think that Allie against Mass's team, um, probably has a strong matchup. I think that that like that's gonna be a strong matchup for her. I think that against I think against Weber's team, she's gonna have a strong matchup. Weber's does have some synthesis or some Pokemon that are gonna be living in that synthesis, but Allie doesn't have to bring it. And if Allie doesn't, Chi really does punch a hole in the team. I think that Allie's main issue is gonna be how she handles that Iron Bundle, but I think that she has a lot of specially defensive Pokemon to handle that, and like in like Muck and well, I guess not really Paldeo Tauros, but like I think that Goldengo can do something. I think that Ditto's gonna be really strong. It's just gonna be how well Weber's plays the Iron Bundle into it. I think that can be a tricky matchup. I think that a tricky matchup for her is going to be Conrad. I think that she has a lot to handle Conrad, but I think that Conrad's big, bulky Pokemon are going to be really hard for Allie to fight against. But also, Allie's Pokemon having a low speed tier is going to be really good against Conrad, who also has a crazy lower speed tier than her, and who relies a lot on taking hits. However, shit like Mousehold is not going to be able to not cannot be allowed to fuck up. Like a tidy up Mousehold like sweeps Allie. Like unless like you know what I'm saying, unless there's like Rocky Helmet Tauros or something. Or Garganackle even maybe. Garganackle kind of walls, but like that's your only wall. And Carnot has Dondozo and Halucha and Amoonguss and Rotom Wash and Glamora and Great Tusk and everything else. If Allie brings Garganackle, that's asking to be like eaten alive. So I think that that's a tricky matchup for her. Um, I also think that I have some tricky stuff up against her, but obviously I'm not gonna expose too much about my team. I think that she does have a lot of strengths, but also some glaring weaknesses, and I really want to see how Allie plays to counteract those weaknesses, and if that makes a difference. But on to Mass. I also, by the way, these aren't draft order. I changed around the teams before the video so that way I could like talk about some things in the order, like in a specific order. And the first thing I wanted to talk about from Mass is his Fire Water Grass core that he's got going on here. That I think is going to be a really, really, really important flex for his team. He's got another Fire type down here, in Armarouge, but I think that Armarouge is not going to have nearly as much defensive prowess as Talonflame will have. At a time, and I also think that all of these having the dual typings is really important for him to be able to have those secondary things. But Toxapex with Regenerator, and Talonflame being 4 times weak to rocks, and Toxicruel having Rapid Spin is really, really important. Also with Toxapex and Toxicruel both being able to set up different types of spikes. Talonflame having Will-O-Wisp. Also liking to run heavy duty boots a lot, really strong. Toxicruel being able to spore people so Talonflame can set up, or being able to set up those toxic spikes so Toxapex can come in with like a good special attacking set, maybe run a Merciless set. There's a lot of different things that can be done between these 3 Pokemon, and I think that their synergy and how they are brought together is really going to define how Mass plays his games. I also think that he's got 2 really strong Dragon types here. He's really, really focusing on the strong Pokemon, the things that could really like hit hard, in my opinion, on his offense. And Thermal Exchange backs Caliber with the Fire typing Unifire typing really strong. Has this Glaive Rush in addition to like this Roaring Moon that can just sit and hit Dragon Claw over and over again. It's really gonna it's gonna break down walls, realistically speaking. Like you run Earthquake on this, and on this you run just like if you can get like Fire Fang or Earthquake, and then you just pretty much beat anything. Like if this gets walled by something, then Roaring Moon comes in. If Roaring Moon walls something or gets walled by something, Excalibur is going to come in, and they're just going to eat each other's walls, and it's going to be really hard. But also with that, they have the Dragon Fairy Steel Core from the Tinkaton sitting here. I do think that Tinkaton does have a lot of weaknesses and a lot of things that it will suffer against. Like for instance, like Weber's Hippowdon team really gonna suffer. It's gonna suffer against. I think it's really gonna suffer against like Ali's son, for sure. But that's what those dragons are for. But even then, I don't think Baxcalibur takes anything from Chiyu, so we're gonna see how that goes. Um, then down here we have like lower down we have Crocodile, we have Armarouge, we have I think this Intimidate Crocodile is going to be a really important sub for these three Pokemon up here. Intimidate Crocodile has rocks and has Intimidate, and it's going to be really, really strong at filling in the gaps that these three cannot. So Crocodile is really going to be the glue that holds these three together, and I really think that this Pokemon with its Moxie, its Intimidate, its Stealth Rock, its Knockoff, its massive utility is really going to be strong for Mass, and how he plays this Pokemon is really going to be big. I think that Kilowattrel is a really strong, fast Pokemon for Mass to have, and it really raises his speed tier by a lot. And Mass's flying types are really, really, really powerful. And he has a really strong speed tier in Noivern, in Kilowattrel, in Talonflame, in fucking Roaring Moon. Like, lots of different types, lots of different strengths. His offense is not, like, cannot be understated. His defense cannot be underestimated. This Lycanroc, I talked about it in my draft video about this set that's really, really, really gonna play a big role for Mass, and I really hope he uses it. So Mass, if you're watching this, go watch my draft video. Electros as well. I think that this holds the same thing that Crocodile does in its Levitate is going to be really important because once Talonflame Terra types, it loses its flying, and then these three kind of lose to ground types. I think that like Kilowattrel and Electros, Kilowattrel having fast volt switches and Electros having slow ones is going to be really important, as well as people who have hard weaknesses to electric types like Ali, who only has Sandy Shocks to deal with it. Chase, who only has Clodsire to deal with it. I don't know. I think that it's going to be really strong for Mass to bring these Volt Switchers. He's going to have to play both of them. I think it might be strong for him to bring both of them in a game. Like how people used to bring like Tapu Koko and Alolan Raichu together. These Pokemon might have to come together. But I do think that he has some weaknesses. I think that wall breakers, like things that hit really, really hard and are really fast by general, kind of beat his team. Scarf Pokemon beat his team. Something like Quaquaval could just run a fucking train with if you weaken that Pex. I don't know. I think that it's really going to be if Mass can handle being swept, because like he doesn't really have that thing that's like, oh, I'm Prankster Thunderwave, or I'm Priority Sucker Punch, or you know what I'm saying. He doesn't really have that really hard hitting thing besides like Talonflame with Gale Wings. So, and like Lycanroc's a Cell Rock, which I don't know if he's really going to rely on that Pokemon that much because its utility needs to be used elsewhere. So, I'm worried about that. But, you know, he's got Scarf Crocodile. He could run Scarf other things if he really wants to. So, Armarouge even. But, next up I have Chase. Chase's team is really awkward because his speed tiers are really weird. He has a lot of speed control, and that is where I think his plays lie. He can run Trick Room on Iron Valiant. Iron Hands loves Trick Room. Gugudra loves Trick Room. Hatterene sets it. Grimmsnarl can set it. But Trick Room is also gets counteracted by Prankster because Trick Room is negative priority. So Prankster will not work on that. Remember that, anybody's playing. He has two different types of weather sitting here in the back with a Beartic. But Beartic has lots of coverage, which means that he can't really get walled on top of Terra's existing. So it's a really hard predicting game, but it's also the matter of, say, like, my issue with Chase's draft is, say someone doesn't predict him. Say, like, he runs a Trick Room team, and someone else predicts him to run Rain, and they build against it. Okay, here's my thing. Say someone chooses not to predict and builds for everything on his team. They build for Trick Room, they build for Rain, they build for Snow. They build basically to outspeed the Beartic no matter what, and they build to counteract if there's a Trick Room, right? They run a Pokemon with Trick Room to just click Trick Room if Chase clicks it first, so that way the room goes back to normal, right? What does he do? He's got like good cores, like he's got Gudra, he's a good defensive mon. Dunsparce takes a lot of hits. Clodsire is unaware, which makes it really, really good against things that set up on Chase's team, but nothing sets up on Chase's team because he's so offensive. Because Gudra hits so hard, Iron hits so hard, Iron Valiant, Quaquaval, all this shit hits so hard that you can't really set up on it besides like maybe Grimmsnarl or like maybe Pelipper. So like he doesn't have those utility mons that like to set up on he has really offensive Pokemon that no one likes to set up on, and then he has Clodsire that is not going to do anything because no one's ever going to set up. The only Pokemon that's going to set up is going to set up on Clodsire, and they're going to like sub Leech Seed this thing to death. And then his team is going to get fucked because his team gets fucked by sub, which is another thing. When you have really offensive Pokemon that can't take any hits, your team gets fucked by substitute. So, I am afraid for those weaknesses, but I'm also really, really, really hyped for his strengths. I really want Chase to play offense. I want him to use Dunsparce as a Body Slam Serene Grace mon, so that way he can para important mons. Like this Pokemon needs to come in, it needs to para the fast Pokemon that it needs to para the slow Pokemon so that way they can't click good moves against your and gets your hard hitting Pokemon, and it needs to para the fast Pokemon so your other Pokemon can outspeed it. But this Pokemon needs to come and do the work it needs to do and be your utility and not get set up on because it's Thunder Waving everything. Or not Thunder Waving, but Body Slamming, para everything. And Grimmsnarl also has the para and also has the screens and shit. And you can set up your screens, which also is important, by the way. Grimmsnarl with screens, huge for this team. Huge for this really, really offensive team. And will make those substitutes hurt a little less. But also, screens can be wiped. So remember that as well, because like Brick Break exists. But yeah, like I said, this thing needs to come in and set up work. And Gudra needs to come in and... I think Gudra needs to be used effectively. I think that it has some decent matches. Like, I think it has a decent match into Chiyu on Ali's team. And also that Sandy Shocks can Volt Switch up on it. But also Gudra takes those all day, every day. I think another thing that Chase is missing is momentum. Like, does not get anything here, nothing. Pelipper gets U-turn. Drifblim gets Strength Sap, which is really good, but no. This has on there this thing that's about it. Also, this Magic Bounce is gonna be really important because this makes Chase not lose to hazards, which is another thing that his team would potentially lose to. But with that being said, Pelipper dies to rocks, and if I set up rocks on Chase's team, that can't get rid of it. That can't. Dunsparce might get defogged. Dunsparce does not get defogged. Clodsire gets rid of Toxic Spikes. Hatterene with Magic Bounce. If it doesn't come in a game, though, Pelipper has defog, and that's it. That's your only hazard removal. So Pelipper has to come every game, or you lose to hazards. It's like Pelipper or Hatterene. And Hatterene can't come in on everything. So, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if Hatterene can come in on Tinkaton, and if I'm right, doesn't Tinkaton get rocks? So this is just free rocks for Mass against Chase's team. So, really scary thoughts. Lots of weaknesses in this draft, but really, really, really strong mons and really, really, really control-heavy Pokemon. Chase is really going to have to define his momentum and make plays. If you do not have a lot of U-turn Pokemon, you have to make doubles. You have to make triples. You have to make game-winning plays. And you can't do that. Like, and that sometimes that may look like inting. Sometimes that may look like over-predicting. But then if you know that someone's going to try to make you over-predict, that's when you catch them. That's when you have them, right? If you know someone's trying to make you over-predict, catch them. If you know that someone's trying to make you under-predict, catch them, right? Think about how that person is trying to make your mindset, and then have the opposite one. That's how you win with hyper offense. That's how you win with Pokemon that like Pokemon like this. And other people are going to have to take that into account too. Remember, try to play. The best thing I can tell you against Chase's team is if you play a good game, like a normal game, without any upsets, I think Chase loses. But if Chase has upset potential because his team likes to rock the boat like hell, if he rocks the boat at all, it's over. So, you know, um, going into Eros' team, Eros has some really, really, really strong Pokemon, and then some really, really, really weak Pokemon. Um, and we're gonna see how. I guess we're gonna see how it comes together. Um, but the way I see it, are like, these top six are brought every game, and substituted out by these occasionally. Palafin, Zero to Hero, broken. I don't need to say a lot about this Pokemon because it hurts a lot. And that's it. And its HP is crazy, and its attack is good, and its speed is good, and everything else is good. But this Pokemon cannot Terra, so it is missing a little bit of its offense that it wants to have, unless it builds Band or unless it sets up. Also, this Pokemon has to come in and then back out again, which makes it really hard to use because you basically are giving. Okay, so in this really, really offensive meta, in my opinion, right now, I think Pokemon is in an offensive meta, and in an offensive meta where you have to give somebody 2 free turns. You have to give. Well, I guess it's technically 2 free turns because it's the 1 free turn where you have to send in Palafin if you don't send it in if you don't send it in like on your free turn. Sending in Palafin is 1 turn, and then switching it back out is another turn. So you're giving your opponent 2 turns before your Palafin can come back in again, and then it has to come back in again, and then it can finally do work. That really, really, really hurts your team. And I think that that's kind of the same reason I don't think Revival Blessing is like the greatest thing in the world, because this has weaknesses to that. Besides that, its defenses are good but not amazing. Its HP is good but not like great. It can be beat by coverage moves, and if you never let this Pokemon come in, like if you build a team of 6 and all 6 Pokemon threaten Palafin, then Palafin's useless. If every Pokemon on your team threatens this Pokemon can't like come in on anything, then it can't do anything. You know, if it can't set up and it can't just sit and be banned and hit hard on your team, it can't do anything. This Pokemon is similar in a way that like if you wall it, it's good. We let this Pokemon have Terra, and I don't remember why we let that happen exactly, but it hits really hard. And Sword of Ruin makes its attack stat crazy too. My only issue with this Pokemon is its coverage is ass, and it's kind of the same as Palafin, where Palafin isn't frail, but it can't come in. This thing is frail. This thing gets destroyed by Mach Punch. This thing gets destroyed by Vacuum Wave. This thing gets destroyed by both fighting type priority moves. Which is good that Arrows has a bunch of the strong fighting types that have those priority moves, but oof. We're gonna see how that one goes. This Pokemon is really strong though. Cerulege also really strong. Has the weak armor sweep, but Arrows likes Flash Fire more than he likes weak armor. I don't agree with that opinion, and I think that Arrows will have to change it as the weeks go on in order to succeed with this Pokemon, like fully. And will have to eventually run a weak armor set at some point, in my opinion, if he to succeed. But I also think that Flash Fire is like good, but also Cerulege I don't think is like the greatest thing in the world. But also he's got this water. He's got Palafin up here, and he's also got Gastrodon right here that make up a Fire Water Grass core between Cerulege, Breloom, and Gastrodon, right? I think that that's good and that's strong. It's also like he's also got like the fighting and ghost type stuff. You know, you got the ghost to hit the psychics, which hit the fighting, and so on. And I don't know. I think that and you got like the fighting to hit the dark that hits the ghost. Good stuff. Breloom, is a really good stallmon and a really good stall breakermon. He has like a lot of things here. So he has Palafin here that hits really hard and can take some hits to come when it comes in. You have Chien-Pao here that can take 0 hits, but it hits really hard and it's fast. You have Cerulege that can come in and sweep, and it can't hit very hard like off. It can hit kind of hard, but it normally has to set up a little bit to be good because it doesn't have a lot of speed. Breloom is a wall buster that it's offensive and defensive. It is defensive enough that it can take on things that it's strong against, and it's offensive enough that it can like force out things that it's strong against. So this Pokemon is really important on a team that needs to force things out, and that makes it good. The way in which Eros chooses to run this Pokemon is really important. If he decides to run a Effect Spore ever, I think he's throwing. I do think that the Gastrodon is going to have a hard time being brought because he does have Palafin. But he also kind of does need this Storm Drain at the same time. He kind of do need it. And bringing this and Palafin isn't the worst thing in the world. We're changing this to blue because if you bring the pink version, you're gross. Orthworm, I think, is a really important Pokemon too. I think people underestimate this Pokemon. I think Earth Eater is good. And I think that, like how I was talking about how Crocodile is going to be the glue that holds the other team together, this Steel-type Pokemon is going to be really strong for these things. Eros does have a critical weakness, though. He does have one very, very, very critical weakness, and that's going to be the whole reason why Orthworm is so good on his team. And also why Chien-Pao is so good on his team. He has no fairies. So what's going to stop someone like Mass from just bringing like Baxcalibur, Roaring Moon, and Noivern and like dropping Dracos, dropping Outrages? Right? Like Chien-Pao hurts, but like if one of them is Scarfed, it's fucked. And then if Eros has to run Scarf or has to run like Banded Ice Shard, then this Pokemon can't like do the work it needs to do, right? So like, and I guess like Spore on Breloom stops that kind of, but like Orthworm can't take on like 3 dragons by himself. You know, can't take on like 2 dragons by himself, like that kind of thing. So, whew. Robska, Revival Blessing, and that's it. It's all this Pokemon's going to do, and I think that it's the same thing as like it's the same idea of like losing turns. You're basically choosing. You basically only have Robska. When you bring Robska, you're choosing to have 5.5 Pokemon. And the reason why like the half Pokemon is one of your Pokemon on your team that isn't Robska is 1.5, and Robska doesn't exist. That's the way I think about it. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Eros will prove me wrong, and maybe we'll run like some cool shit because it does have some cool coverage and shit. But this Pokemon is underwhelming. Primeape is strong but has no speed really, not a good enough attack, and does not have and has Rage Fist, but it's not strong enough. Also does not have nearly enough HP to be able to make Final Gambit important. U-turn and coverage is good on this Pokemon, but this is one of his only Pokemon with U-turn. So is this really important? Like this Pokemon and like Honchkrow and then these Volt Switchers, and then that's it, right? That's like all of his low tier Pokemon are all of his Volt Switch Pokemon, and they can't force anything out. Like Honchkrow can, but Primeape can only like Primeape is like the other like the what's the other thing? There's another Pokemon, and it's the monkey Pokemon, and it's a fighting type, and it forces shit out, and it does the same thing that Primeape does, but better. That's what Primeape is. Defiant is good though. It's decent. It's just fuck. I get that Eviolite Primeape exists, and that Primeape, I think Primeape gets Stealth Rock. That does not make it a wall. Not in this generation, and not in any future. I think that Toxicroak loses to everything that Primeape does because both of their stats are shit, and Robska falls into that boat the same way. And also Honchkrow, like all these low tiers have bad stats. Like all these bottom 6 have really bad stats, and they lose to any Pokemon that's good. And what I mean by that is Chien-Pao is good. That means that you can't get by on just having bulk. You have to have bulk and you have to resist. Same with like Baxcalibur, right? You can't just get it by on being bulky because you'll still take like 30-40%. You have to get by on being bulky and resisting. Eros has a lot of like these tank Pokemon down here that like Pokemon that like want to tank because they're not fast enough to outspeed anything, but they can't because they get one shot by everything. And then Honchkrow doesn't get one shot by everything, but it wants to one shot with Sucker Punch, and if it doesn't one shot with Sucker Punch, it's pretty much useless, and that makes it, unless it's like Scarf or something like that, it basically forces him to have to do extra shit with these bottom 6 Pokemon to make them useful, and that means that they're only good in niche situations, which means that really to build against Eros, you only need to build against these top 6. And then you need to just make sure you don't lose to these bottom Pokemon. Because sometimes if you lose these bottom Pokemon, they can pop off. But like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that Eros has a really, really iffy draft, really strong start, and a really bad ending. So I'm excited to see how he takes it. He can prove me wrong, and prove me wrong he could, you know, and I'll believe it. But he picked stuff he likes, and I'm going to respect that through and through, right? Conrad here. I talked about Conrad a lot earlier, about him having a lot of slow Pokemon, and also having a lot of hard hitters. He does the same thing that Chase does, in my opinion. But the only issue that Conrad had was not being able to run Trick Room as effectively. And he counteracted that by some of his Pokemon he built later, and I'm going to talk about these lower Pokemon down here, because these Pokemon make his team. It is these Pokemon that bring his team together, and I'm going to talk about why I like Conrad's team so much, because I really like Conrad's team. So I'm going to talk about this stuff first. So first off, I'm actually going to say Amoonguss, Dondozo, and Skeledirge make up a Fire, Water, Grass core, and Dondozo can be swapped out for Rotom Wash, and Rotom Wash, Amoonguss, and Skeledirge is really strong too. But Skeledirge being able to be unaware and have Slack Off is really, really good, and Torch Song is really good. Soundproof is gonna make it kind of, like any soundproof Pokemon you gotta watch out for. Besides that, this Pokemon is just really strong, and it's hard to keep things in against it, because you have to swap something in to Skeledirge, which no one likes to swap into Skeledirge, not a single mon. And then not only does it have to swap in, it can't just like sit in front of him. You can't sit in front of Skeledirge and then like Stealth Rock and Spike, because it's gonna Torch Song you 5 times, and then it's gonna one shot everything else on your team. You have to threaten it too, and that sucks. That changes the game, because like Eviolite Primate tanks a hit. It is not threatening it out. Like all these bottom Pokemon on Eros' team that I was talking about earlier, I was talking about how they're like too weak to threaten shit out. Skeledirge beats all of these Pokemon. Every single one. Even Honchkrow. Sucker Punch, if you're Moxie boosted, he's unaware. If he runs any sort of defense and like has a good Terra, or hits you with like a Blast Burn, or hits you with anything that hurts, or has a Torch Song up and you have to Sucker Punch it, and he's physically defensive and destroys you, like that's hard, you know? That also means shit like Hatterene can't stay in, because Skeledirge outspeeds. So even though Hatterene takes a hit, Skeledirge Torch Song's the first thing, gets a special attack boost, and then Shadow Ball's next turn. Also, you can't just send in a fast Pokemon that can take one hit and then can't take another, because you send in Iron Valiant on Skeledirge, and then you take one hit and you take 60%, and then you can't one-shot, and then Skeledirge one-shots you. And it's just the case with so many other Pokemon. Like you don't like Pex doesn't threaten you out. Pex doesn't have enough HP to threaten you out. Pex likes to sit in front of things and click Toxic Spikes and protect and shit, and like Baneful Bunker. You can't do that against Skeledirge when Skeledirge gets those XP or gets those boosts, especially if you're Terra. So this Pokemon is scary. Great Tusk hits really hard. It also, if I'm not mistaken, it gets... Oh, it doesn't get Rock Polish. Never mind. I thought it gets a Rock Polish. It does get Stealth Rock. So this is a Rocker. It gets Earthquake. Or it gets Headlong Rush, which is basically close combat, and it gets close combat. This Pokemon hurts everything, and building against it sucks, because there's nothing that takes the hit. These three Pokemon right here suck to build against, because any physical wall that takes one hit
or any wall that takes 1 hit probably doesn't take the rest. Makes it really hard to go up against. King Gambit, just another slow Pokemon. This has priority though, where these don't. So fast Pokemon that can super effective one shot these Pokemon, strong, really strong. King Gambit, is late game sweeper, can run Defiant against Intimidate users, but Supreme Overlord is also really good. Sucker Punch can run Iron Defense. This is also another rocker. I don't want to go over Pokemon individually very much, but I really need to stress how these 4 Pokemon are really, really bulky and really, really strong. And because they're all like kind of different, yeah, they all are different typings. That means that you can't just run one thing and hope it works. You have to handle every single one, and that sucks. That's a really, really strong offensive core, and we haven't even got to this part that makes it suck even more. So I'm gonna talk about Hawlucha real fast because Hawlucha I think is another strong mon, because it's basically like it can hit like hard like Great Tusk can, but it can be fast. Can run all the seeds. Unburden's really good, and this Pokemon is a really good sub. And also all these Pokemon can do a lot of damage, but they're not really sweepers. This Pokemon is a sweeper. This Pokemon is one of the scariest sweepers, in fact, and it hurts like a bitch. Because Sword Stance is crazy, and you can run sub, and you can run so many other things to make this Pokemon good, and it makes your speed tier insane. It makes this piss poor speed tier like turn crazy. Picks up Hydreigon, not an amazing speed, but here's the thing about Hydreigon and Scizor and Maushold and Rotom Wash. These 3 Pokemon get U-turn. This Pokemon gets Volt Switch. This Pokemon can have a slow U-turn or a fast one if he wants. This Pokemon has a fast U-turn. This one has a medium U-turn, and this has a medium U-turn that can be a fast one, and this one can also be fast. These 3 Pokemon can be scarfed and love it. This Pokemon's fast as fuck. It doesn't need a scarf. And this Pokemon can be slow, so not only can you scarf it, but it can also be a slow U-turn. And this Pokemon has stab U-turn. And this Pokemon has stab Volt Switch, and it can be specs, and that hurts like a bitch too. Also, this Pokemon is first picked, can Population Bomb, and pretty much take out any tank. So you know how all these Pokemon, their biggest threat is something that can like one-shot them? And like it can outspeed and one-shot them? This is the Pokemon that does it. This is the Pokemon that can outspeed and one-shot almost anything that doesn't resist it, and that isn't like oddly specific. It does have a critical weakness that I did promise not to share on video. For the sake of somebody's for the sake of somebody's team, but it does have, you know what I'm saying? It definitely like has a lot that it just has going for it. And Hydreigon, Specs Draco hurts. Specs Dark Pulse hurts. Scarf Draco hurts. Scizor, you can set up. This is your other setup mon, so Hawlucha, you know what I'm saying? Also, this Pokemon gets Dragon Dance, so it can be physical. So it can be another setup mon. So these 3 Pokemon right here are scary. Maushold can get Tidy Up, can also be a setup Pokemon. So that's 4 setup Pokemon in a row that all have different things. Really strong. Can also, 3 of them can U-turn. I don't think Hawlucha gets U-turn. No, Hawlucha gets U-turn too. I'm sorry. There's 5 U-turners. Or 5 turners. So all of this is not okay. Like, I just think that that's really, really strong. Scizor gets Defog. We already talked about all the rockers up here. Maushold gets Tidy Up as well. So that's 2 hazard removals. And Rotom gets Trick. So something that I thought that Conrad had a weakness to at some points were like Pokemon that can sit in front of these Pokemon. And that's where Conrad has Trick Rotom. Because if a Pokemon can sit in front of all of these Pokemon, it can't be tricked. It can't be tricked to Scarf and like still be like chillin', most of the time. Also, like Willow and Volt Switch and lots of other stuff that Rotom Wash brings to the table, along with the typing, Electric, Levitate, I talked about, really good. Water typing is great. Glamora with Toxic Debris makes the Tidy Up really, really strong. Because Tidy Up, I think, only takes it off of your side. Don't quote me on that, but Toxic Debris, really strong. Can lay down spikes, can lay on toxic spikes, can lay down stealth rock, can spiky shield, can toxic. So the thing about toxic is that not only are you a poison type, so it never misses, but this can also run corrosion. So that means that Conrad, if he ever looks at a team Like, say he's just looking at this team right here. He's looking at Chase's team. And you're like, oh, man, dude, what beats my team? He's like, oh, fuck, bro. I really want to bring this Great Tusk. I really want to bring this fucking Dondozo. I really want to bring this Skeleturge. But Skeleturge, unaware Clodsire. And Dondozo, if the Clodsire is water absorbed, then I can get fucked. And, like, King Gambit doesn't, that's a steel type and all that shit. Clodsire walls me. Oh, fuck. What if I decide I just want to bring fucking Glamora and just Toxic it? Like, oh, fuck, bro. This, this Pokemon walls me. Why don't I just Toxic it? And it just never misses. And you can't tell me no. The only Pokemon that this Pokemon can't Toxic is the Breloom with Poison Heal. And it's not like this Pokemon loses to Breloom. Base 30 special attack. Salamence is 130 attack, bro. It gets a Memento, it gets Power Gem. This Pokemon right here is a threat too. Conrad has a lot of threats up here and a lot of threats down here, and it really shows. Klefki also, I talked about how Conrad needed his speed tier from the Hydreigon, the Malasol, the Rotom Wash, how that made a speed tier for him. Klefki with Prankster and Thunder Wave, and also with Switcheroo, those two moves make his speed tier ginormous. Because now he can take on everything. And then finally we have Among Us, who I've already talked about being in the really strong core, and also because his Pokemon is Regenerator, it also gets a lot of strength from these U-turn Volt Switch Pokemon. Also, so the biggest strength about Conrad's team is not only does he have Regenerator, not only does he have a fuck ton of hazard removal that's really strong, not only does he have the U-turn Pokemon that can switch in, but he also has all of these Pokemon that hit like a goddamn truck that he can just U-turn into at any given time to just body you out of. Like, Conrad's team is really scary, and it has a lot of momentum that he can work with. And so I'm really scared about that. But last but not least, we're going to talk about Weber's team. Weber's does have an interesting team and has a team full of things that I think that she likes. I think that it comes together in, like, later, but I think that it's really interesting the way it comes together, because it's like a trick team almost. It's a tricky team, because we have this, like, she has this giant special attack and speed iron bundle that's just gonna body everything, that like can't take a hit, and you can just run specs and it just beats everything. It also gets U-turn and has this Slitherwing with first impression in U-turn. So these two Pokemon right here hurt like a bitch, and Slitherwing has priority and Iron Bundle has speed. So that's already two, like, synergies that happen, right? And then you have the synergy of both of these Pokemon having photosynthesis, as well as this Pokemon having photosynthesis down here. Does not carry Sun, but that does not stop her from running Sun. Also this Grass Dark typing, really strong. This Pokemon gets a lot of stuff, but I've already talked about that in my video. This Intimidate Pokemon creates a lot of space for Weber's, because it can stop anything that's that's trying to be physically offensive. The Moxie also works. This Pokemon can be Scarf. This is a lot of offense in a Pokemon and a lot of defense in a Pokemon. Can be Roost, Defog if it wants to be. This Salamence can be anything you want it to be, and Salamence is really liked in Draft League because of how versatile it can be. And I've talked about that a lot in my video once again. But so far, 4 really strong threats. Screamtail has a fuck ton of utility and like no offense whatsoever, but has all of this coverage, so it doesn't really matter that she doesn't have offense, because she has something to super effectively hit your team always. And also this Pokemon gets Stealth Rock and Wish and Thunder Wave. Really strong ace to have. Bramblegast, immune to flying typing, really good for Slitherwing. 4 times weak to flying, and then you switch into Bramblegast, that's 4 times there, that is immune. Another great synergy. Also, the Fairy Dragon, really good together. We will see that Weber's has a weakness on her team that I'm going to talk about in a second, but this Fairy type is really strong for her. Rotom Mow, Volt Switch, really strong, along with these double U-turners up here. Can be Scarfed, can be Trick. I've already talked about how good all the other Rotoms are, so just know that this Rotom is good too. Espadra and Spiritomb and Screamtail, all 3 together, make this really weird core that doesn't have that you can't really make a lot for, It's really hard to wall, except for like something that I'm about to talk about. And overall, there's one thing that, if you haven't noticed, really, really, really kind of kicks Weber's team, and she doesn't have one of them. But Opportunist really good, Speed Boost really good. This Pokemon is really hard to build against because it can, because okay, so almost if anybody plays Smash, a lot like Smash, you know how people talk about how Rob players, where Rob has really bad matchups into like over half the game, but because of how explosive the character is, it can just like it can win matchups it shouldn't, just because like you have to play perfectly against it. That's how I see Weber's team. Like Espadra, Rotom Mo, this Salamence right here, this Slitherwing, Iron Bundle, you have to play perfectly. But like at the same time, like how does it doesn't come together at all, but it comes together so perfectly. And then we get into the weirdness because 3 Sand Setters, Sandstream, Sandstream, Sandspit, and 2 of them are pure ground type. Also, the 3rd Dark on the team as well, in the Tyranitar pick. Not to say that Tyranitar's bad or anything, and not to say that Hippowdon's bad, because Hippowdon's really strong. Earthquake, Stealth Rock, all that stuff. I talk about how strong all these Pokemon are as individuals, and it's really strong to be able to pick and choose between what you want to bring. Because I think that Weber's has this thing where you have Screamtail, Espadra, and Spiritomb. That's 3 Pokemon that you can choose to bring 1 or 2 of to any fight. And then you have Hippowdon, Sandaconda, Tyranitar. You can choose to bring 1 or 2 of those. And then you can fill in the rest of it with your really, really strong Pokemon that you can bring every game. And then you have like a core. Like these Pokemon work together really well, and so that's a core. These Pokemon work together really well, and that's a core. And also, every single one of all 6 of those Pokemon are really well as individuals and are really strong. And then every other Pokemon, Brambleghast, Rotom Mo, and every other Pokemon up here, work so well together with such like really strong synergy that these tanks, like these tanks or like just tricky Pokemon in general, really, really come together to support it well. But overall, it's a really weird team, and I don't know how much like stuff I can really give on there. Overall, through talking about the teams, my views on them I think have changed a lot since the draft. And I am gonna make, and I personally have really weird ways, but these are my own power rankings. These are my own opinions. They are, the way which I see everything. And yeah, so I'm gonna go over where I think everybody else is, and then I'm going to make another video in the future, going over my personal draft and where I think I fall on this list. But for right now, I'm only gonna go over everybody else. So for Ali, I think, so I think I'm gonna go from like the least strong to the most strong. I think that the least strong team is, I think I have to go with it being Eros and his Tupataro Typhlosions. He does not have enough options, in my opinion, to be able to handle the strongest parts of other people's teams. So he really has to rely on his strong Pokemon, his strong core, to carry him out of it. And if his strong core gets walled or gets beat or dies in the battle and Robska can't revive it, it's kind of over. In my opinion. I think that the next weakest team is one of these 2. And it's so weird because I'm looking at it and it's almost like I'm looking at like the same draft. And I really think at the end of the day, okay, so also you guys have to remember, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about, this is not Eros as a battler. This is not Eros' draft. This is not like Eros as like, this is not how I predict his team will go in the league. as I talk about like and as people win and stuff like that, obviously I'll move them up. But this is not how I think Eros battles. This is how I think his team looks on paper. And with that being said, how I think both of these teams look on paper, I think that Weber's is next and then Chase. And the reason why is because I think that Chase with like Trick Room could like beat some like do some really strong work, and the weather on the side is really strong to have. Weber's has weather with nobody to take advantage of it except for the weather setters. And then has three Pokemon that really want to be in the sun, and she grabbed the wrong weather. So I think that her secondary strategy is so like is basically split into two sections, and both are significantly weaker than Chase's side strategy that he only had to sacrifice three Pokemon for, and then he also has his trick room which works with almost every Pokemon, versus Weber's which only has Sand which works for these three and Sun which works for like these like four, and it doesn't and like both of those hurt Iron Bundle, and so like you know what I'm saying really just Weber's has some things that counteract each other and Chase does not. So I think it has to look like this. Next, I think I have to put Mass's team. And the reason why is because Mass he has some U-turn potential. But he has a lot of the same typings, and I think that so for reference it's between like I'm not putting the first yet. So here I'll do this. I'll do because I realized oh fuck. Ooh. I realized that that like obviously it's not the worst team. It's not the seventh team. So Arrows is gonna be 6, and then I'll put my team like where I think it falls in the future. So my team is unranked. But I think that Mass has the third best team. Lots of really strong Pokemon, really strong core, really like really strong cores like these three together. Really strong tricks, lots of things. But I think that if it came down to it, Mass would run out of stuff first, and would run out of steam first, and would not be able to win the war of attrition between these two teams. And then I'm gonna be weird, and I'm gonna say I really do think that Ali has the second best. I understand that Chiyu is a broken Pokemon, and that Torkoal Chiyu is broken as shit. I also understand that I think personally Ali is probably a better battler than Conrad is, but this is not about battling; it's about draft. And I think that Conrad, with his U-turn Pokemon and his priority Pokemon and his really, really, really strong core, like strong leadoff core, in addition to a strong Volt Turn team, he has two really, really, really strong options, and his team comes together as a team really, really well. Ali has a few Pokemon that body everybody, and if you can find a way around them, or she misplays it with them at all, it's kind of over. Conrad has a really, 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 really good team that comes together, and in my experience in Draft League, the team that can beat the most teams and come together to make strong things generally does better than this team does, because this team does better in the rematches. And in the way our draft works, we're gonna have playoffs of the top 4 teams, and all of those are gonna be rematches. And I think that Conrad has a stronger rematch team than Ali might. But I also think that Ali's a strong battler, and we're gonna see how it goes. So this is how it's gonna be looking. For the rankings, my team is going to be unranked, but with that being said, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about what I think. If you guys think it's wrong, if you guys think it's right, it is okay to disagree. These are my opinions, and I very much say that like I had a hard time trying to figure out how I think everybody's team goes. So, but with that being said, I'll catch you guys next time with my analysis of my own draft and where I think I fall. So peace.